Coming to you live from a repurposed bedroom in the suburbs of Cincinnati, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto. Hello and welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I am your host, Callie Wright, joined by my co-host, Ari Stillman. What's up, Ari?
Mostly poopy butt wieners, for the most part.
Oh,
a few other things, but mostly poopy butt
preschool.
wieners.
So we're in preschool.
Yeah. I mean, we can't do too many swears on this show, so I thought I would just make it a PG swear.
Oh, good. Okay, so I can call you like a butt face and stuff like that, and just sort of get minor admonishment for it instead of actually getting
crap
yelled at.
for brains, that kind of stuff.
Right?
Is crap allowed? Is crap too far?
I think crap's good. I think we can.
Okay.
Do that.
I remember when I started saying crap in 6th grade, and I felt like such a badass because I said crap.
Oh yeah, the first time I said like ass or damn, even like when I would work it in when I was actually talking about a damn. Or, like, I would sarcastically use the word ass when I was actually talking about a donkey. Like, hey, you can't get me in trouble.
I'm so cool.
Like,
I can say forbidden words.
Like, I was 100% that kid.
You gotta feel powerful somehow in your little childhood brain.
Oh, 100%. You gotta have something. So this week we're gonna do an Ask Me Anything. So I know everybody knows what an AMA is because Reddit's a thing, and even though like I don't usually get on Reddit that much, like startling admission, those things are pretty cool, and people ask us questions all the time, through private messages and email and on Facebook and stuff like that. So I thought it would be cool. We've done an AMA before. It was when Daniel was still on the show, and it was well over a year ago, and a lot's happened since then. And obviously we have Ari now. So I figured it'd be a fun thing to do an AMA again. So I put out on social media that we were doing an AMA and had people submit questions for us to answer, and we got some good ones. We got some fun ones. We got some serious ones. So you get good practical stuff. So we're just gonna jump right into it. So
got some rude people.
Right? Rude. God. People.
Rude boys living in the shanty dorms.
People don't have manners. So Kara asked a good one, and one that actually was super relevant to my life not 2 years ago. So Kara asked, do either of you have any experiences or advice for someone in transition limbo? For example, the time between part-time and full-time. That's where I'm at, waiting for my timeline to allow me to go full-time, and it has me practically crawling the walls, wishing for the next 6 months to breeze by so I can progress. And actually, because that's literally where I was for almost a year. I was in that sort of limbo. In I think it was August of 2013, I came out basically to the world as trans, and put this big note on Facebook. I'd already had a bunch of conversations with family and friends, and I was ready to go. I'd finally shed the denial and most of the shame. I mean, obviously that stuff doesn't all go away at once you come out. But I was ready to start moving on from that and start to actually build a life and live a life. But I had work as the stumbling block, and my boss and the folks that I worked with on a personal level, none of them cared. It really wasn't that big of a deal to them. I'd come out to them, and it was not a huge deal, but I was in an industry with a very wealthy, conservative client base that I knew beyond any shadow of a doubt, because of things I'd actually heard these people say. I was not making assumptions, that more than likely I would not be welcome in these folks' houses if I had come out and started to present myself as Callie at work. And, we worked with a lot of contractors, and I know I'm not one to live my life and judge people based on stereotypes, but we'll just say the construction worker, contractor stereotype that you have in your head was true for this specific group of folks that we worked with. So I didn't really know what to do, because I really liked my job and I wanted to keep doing what I was doing, but I knew that I couldn't be in clients' houses anymore. And that was a big thing. Like you got to be in people's houses doing system programming, hanging speakers, hanging TVs, and that kind of stuff. So I was in that kind of limbo for a long time, and I initially thought that well, at least I get to be myself part-time, and I have at least that. And at first that was true. It was amazing. Like being able to be myself at least part of the time instead of no time. It was awesome. On the weekends with my friends or with my family, when I get home at night and that kind of stuff. And that was awesome. But then, as I'm sure anyone who's been in this position knows, that wears off. And now you're not focusing on so much that I can be myself part of the day. It's that I can't be myself part of the day. At my job, at the place where I get a paycheck and I spend most of my time. And that started to really weigh on me. And some of the worst struggles that I've had emotionally and psychologically were during this time. And honestly, really all that got me through it was taking a little extra time to be a little bit more fancy, if that makes sense. I would like that's the best way that I can describe it, because now, honestly, like if you look at me day to day, I am not like a super, super fancy girl. Like I don't wear makeup every day. I don't wear like super nice clothes every day. Like I'm a pretty like average everyday girl when it comes to like the way that I dress and the way that I present. Cause it's an everyday thing for me now. I'm allowed to be myself. So it's not as much of a thing for me, but I would take some extra time if I was going out with friends or if I was going out with my family, do my makeup really nice, paint my nails, get dressed up, present myself really the way that I want to present myself, and really just throw myself into who I was so I could at least have that time. And, there's no taking away how bad it sucks when you have to step away from that and put the wrong you back on. But and aside from that, really all you can do is try and commiserate and find support. And, I had a support group that was really helpful for me. I had, other trans folks that I could talk to, that I could just, sort of commiserate. And I can't overstate the importance of having people that you can talk to that know exactly what you're going through. So that was really it for me. Sort of whatever the me that I was hiding was, the times when I didn't have to hide it, I just went full on 100%. So I could sort of fill up on that feeling of being able to be myself to sort of hold me over during the times that I couldn't, if that makes sense. So, Ari, did you have any thoughts?
My experience was a little bit atypical, as it always is, because I have to be a special snowflake in everything that I do. I didn't really have the experience of having to come out and transition in an environment where I had been known as someone else previously, because I moved from Arkansas to Illinois with my partner for him to attend grad school. And so I was in a new place with, new social groups and a new employer, and I could just reinvent myself however I wanted to. So and when I moved, I immediately started going by Ari, and I started, making steps towards getting hormones and changing my name. The weirdest thing for me was actually keeping my own name straight, because people didn't even know that I had ever had a different name other than like my employer, because they had to know my legal name for background check and everything. But they knew that I went by Ari, so that's what they called me. And all my friends just know me as Ari. They don't even know what my other name was. So it was a little bit atypical, and I don't know really what I would have done had I been in the same social circles and same employment that I was in before, because social anxiety is kind of a bitch. So I think the thing that helped me the most was being able to make a plan for the future. Even when I was in a place where I wasn't able to access hormones or be able to change my name or be open about who I was at the time, I was able to look forward. Even if I didn't have a definite time of when this was going to happen, I would be able to tell myself, in the future, when I get this money or when I get more independence, I can make these steps towards doing what I want to do. And that was really helpful to me, just to set a plan and then have something to, instead of just kind of floating around being like, oh, this sucks, I can't do anything and nothing's ever going to change. I was like, yeah, this kind of sucks right now, but I do have a plan for what I can do in the future, and it's just a matter of going day by day and making it to the time when you can start to work on that plan.
Yeah, it really helped me thinking about that too. Like thinking about, when I initially went and saw a doctor for hormones, I had to wait like 3 months for the appointment to get there. And then I had to wait a couple of days for blood work. But I just had to keep reminding myself, like, waiting sucks. Like, there's nothing that anyone's going to say that's like, oh, okay, waiting is no big deal all of a sudden. But, like, it really did help me to keep reminding myself that every time I've had to wait for something, the day does come. You know, it is going to happen. It's going to be there. So, and that, you know, it's not the solution. It's not going to make you stop feeling bad or stop, you know, wanting so badly the thing that you want or need. But it does sort of, I guess, take the edge off or maybe decompress, remove a little bit of the pressure. I think so. So, yeah, I think that's an important thing, too.
And it's also helpful to remember that even though it sucks, you know for a fact that you can get through it because you've already gotten through it. You know,
yeah.
Your life before this is what it has been, and you're looking forward to the future. But you know that however long it takes to get there, you know that you have the strength to make it to that point because you've done it already. Very
well said. Very well said. What do we got
next? Thanks, therapist.
Yeah. What do we got next?
Matt said or asked, what songs go on the soundtrack of Destroying Transphobia? It's a great question that I have absolutely no answer to.
For me, it's almost the entire Rage Against the Machine catalog.
Oh.
You know, very social justice-y. There's really nothing in there that addresses, you know, transphobia or homophobia specifically that I can think of off the top of my head. But it's all very socially progressive, sort of, you know, destroying the right, destroying privilege, you know, elevating the oppressed, and that kind of thing. And I know, like, it is cheesy, but like when I listen to Rage Against the Machine and I'm like, I'm in one of those moods, it really does sort of get me fired up. Like it's almost like, you know, a football player listens to like heavy metal before a game or something like that and gets pumped up. Like Rage Against the Machine is like that for me. So, yeah, I'd have to say that for sure. There is a band called Gloss. I'm trying to remember. Girls Living Outside Society's Shit. And
oh, nice.
to my understanding, the entire band they're all trans women. And so they're a punk rock band, and it's like old school crusty ass punk rock. And the newest EP that they put out is called The Trans Day of Revenge. And the opening song is called Give...
The time has come.
Yeah, the opening song is called Give Violence a Chance.
Oh, God.
So if you're into sort of like really violent, aggressive kind of punk rock, and honestly, that's not usually my thing, but I really enjoy this stuff, and not even necessarily because of the subject matter, but so every once in a while I'll find punk or hardcore, like old school kind of hardcore like this that I just really like for some reason. So yeah, I would definitely check out Gloss. I'll put a link in the description box of the show if I can remember to do that. So
whatever song makes you happy, that's the song that goes on the soundtrack.
We don't do happy here, Ari. Get out. Get out.
I guess so. I'm usually so good about not being happy.
Yeah. So Ingrid is up next. Love Ingrid. By the way, I'm going to put a link in the description box for Ingrid and their partner. Not my story to tell, but they've fallen on some hard times and they really need some help out for really, really awful reasons. I'm going to put a link. They're doing a fundraiser to try and, you know, pay rent and pay bills over the next couple of months. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes for that. Please check that out. Throw them a couple of bucks if you're able. They're good friends. They're good people. They're activists, and they're in need of help right now. So if you can, help them out. But on to Ingrid's question. So Ingrid has two questions, one directed specifically at Ari and one directed specifically at me. So Ingrid's first question for Ari is, do you want or need any surgeries for dysphoria? Obviously a super personal question, but we've talked about that on the show before, so I figured it was okay to let
And you know I'm not shy about answering these kind of things. I am unsure at this point. I have I bind my chest every day, and I never leave the apartment without a chest binder on for dysphoria reasons, other than if I'm going to exercise, because it's really dangerous to exercise with a binder on. You can't breathe very well. And it's kind of a double-edged thing, because I don't like to be seen out in public like that. I don't like to interact with other people and have like that quote unquote feminine body part showing or whatever, but I really like them for sex. So I'm a little bit unsure as to whether or not I would like to have top surgery in the future. I go back and forth on that. Because my chest dysphoria is pretty manageable just by binding, because I have a pretty small chest anyway, so binding makes it pretty flat and not very noticeable. So it takes care of the dysphoria for the most part. So I'm not sure that surgery is necessary. It would be nice and less of a hassle to not have to bind every day, and probably healthier for my ribs or something. But yeah, I don't know at this point. I'll see in the future how I feel about it when I'm at a place where I can actually afford it and afford to take time off work or school or what I'm doing at the moment. As far as, I don't have any bottom dysphoria really, so no real plans for anything of that nature. So there you go. But I would like to have surgery to have a different brain. So if you have that.
Fair enough. And Ingrid's question for me is, how is the weight loss going, and is your surgery schedule going well? I'm sort of going back and forth on doing sort of, maybe not an entire episode, but like one of those extras that we do sometimes about my weight loss journey and kind of how it was going.
Newsflash.
Oh, I was going to say, was that the theme music?
No, that's the boopadoops. You know the boopadoops when it's the breaking news.
Right. Got it. Yeah. Okay. So, initially I had planned to do like an entire sort of like radio documentary podcast thing about it. And I produced one episode, figured out it was way more work than even this is because of the style I wanted to do it in. And it was just something I didn't have the time for, but I do think there's some valuable stuff that I have learned that would be cool to share. So, and I did get a couple of responses. I had mentioned on the show if people wanted to hear it to respond. And I did get a couple of emails in Facebook messages saying that would be a thing people were interested in hearing. But sort of the TLDR version is that as of now, I'm down about 55 pounds from the weight that I started at in, it's been about 5 months since I've started the process, which is awesome. And honestly, most of what I've done, I've learned from a book called The Diet Fix, which, if memory serves, was actually recommended to me by a listener, which it wouldn't be a stretch for me to say that this book and the advice therein was life-changing. It's all science-based. The guy cites studies for all of the claims that he makes. And basically what he did is he went through and looked at people who lose weight and keep it off. What are the habits that they do that allow them to do that? And he sort of lays this all out in a sort of system to where he helps you sort of reshape your life to be conducive to weight management or weight loss, if that's what you're looking for. And it's very, it's not shame-based. It's not like you have to torture yourself. And like one of the entire concepts is that you're not going to stick with it if you're torturing yourself. So you have to figure out a way to do this that you are satisfied. You're not hungry all the time and you're not eating food that you hate. And luckily enough, it turns out for most people, that's not a thing that you have to do. Obviously everyone's different. There are medical conditions and certain things about people's bodies that, this sort of thing may not work for. And one of my most hated phrases in the world is, if I can do it, anyone can. I hate that. But the stuff that I've been doing is evidence-based. There's really good science behind the stuff that I've been doing. And honestly, a lot of it is stuff that you've probably heard people say before. It's counting calories, making sure I have a calorie deficit, moderate exercise, making sure that I'm eating a ton of protein in every meal. And that's really been the difference maker for me. I used to actually think that I had an undiagnosed eating disorder because I would binge and I would not be able to control myself. And it turns out I was just not eating the right kinds of foods. I started concentrating on getting a ton of protein in every meal, and I just don't get hungry anymore. Like, I even caught myself undereating, almost dangerously undereating, and I wasn't hungry because I just focused on eating not nothing but protein, but primarily protein. So, and that's kind of got me to where I am. So, if there's enough of a demand for it, we'll do something, maybe an extra about that, sort of explaining that more in depth. But yeah, and then my weight loss surgery is scheduled for December 21st. I am very excited / nervous about that whole thing. I've never had surgery of any kind before. I have a pretty high pain tolerance generally, but I've never been under anesthesia and I've never had surgical incisions made in my body. So like, I may turn into a complete and utter wuss, or I may handle it well. I've talked to a lot of different people who have had it, and I've heard, there's a spectrum of experience. Some people are like almost up and at 'em, in like 2 or 3 days. And some people take a week or 2 weeks to bounce back. So, I don't know. So yeah, it is going well. I've got my date. I go on my, starting my 2-week liquid diet on December 7th before surgery. And after that, it'll be like a month or 6 weeks before I eat solid food again, which I am not stoked about. But yeah, so it's going well, honestly, and I'm really excited. It's well past time, and it looks like I dodged a bullet too, because I found out that my company's new insurance that I'm switching to at the beginning of the year does not cover bariatric surgery. So I am really glad that I scheduled that before the end of the year.
Job.
Yeah, exactly. Although although I do have a friend that works in a different part of the company who was like in the middle of her process and is just not going to be able to do it now. Which is really shitty. Like it blows my mind that a big company like that would decide to not cover bariatric surgery, because like I feel like that's a really common thing. But yeah. So what do we got next?
Mel said, I know this has probably been asked 100 times, but what can we do as allies to help the LGBTQ community? What specifically do you consider the traits of an ally to be? What do you see them doing correctly and incorrectly? What harms and what helps? That's more than one question.
Right, I know. And Ari kept asking without making it be my turn for each new question.
Let's just say the whole thing. I like this question because we get to tell people what they're doing wrong. And I love doing that.
Except that's not what we're going to do, Ari. That's not what we're going to do.
She said, what do you see them doing incorrectly?
Right. That doesn't mean we have to take pleasure in saying people are doing this wrong.
Here's what you do wrong.
God, you're just so bad. So honestly, I think the biggest thing is to make sure that you're listening. It's, to me, sort of mind-boggling how often I have to explain to people that when you want to do something to help, you want to do something that's trying to meet a stated need or want of the community that you're being an ally to. I don't know if I've told this story on the show before. I probably have. I'm really bad at telling the story multiple times. But when Leila Alcorn died in Cincinnati, there was a member of the community here, not a trans person, who decided that what he wanted to do to help was to raise money to build a memorial. And he put up an Indiegogo thing for $2,500 to build this memorial. And everybody in the community is like, we have organizations here that have boots on the ground that are providing direct services to the trans community, medical services, mental health services, housing, food, that kind of stuff. Like, we desperately need money to fund these groups because they're providing direct and practical support to people in the community. And he's trying to build a memorial. And it's like, I get it. Like, it's a gesture. It's a good gesture, but that's not what we need. That's not what any of us are asking for right now. And so I had a phone conversation with him one night, and I was like, look, like, I really appreciate what you're trying to do. Like, I get where it's coming from, but right now we need to be funding these organizations who are literally keeping people alive. And I thought that he understood. And then he was on the news the next day 4 times talking about fundraising for this damn memorial. And so he did. He raised just over $2,500, and the memorial never surfaced.
Oh, wow.
So that was $2,500 that could have gone to, there's an organization in Cincinnati that at the time, their annual budget was like $4,000 or $5,000 that provides direct services to the trans community. So like, imagine what they could have done with that $2,500. So the thing that you see often is that people get it in their heads, like, this is what I'm going to do to help. And it's 100% their idea, and it has nothing to do with anything the community is asking for or that the community needs. And what gets difficult is when you push back against that and you say, well, I'm sorry, that's not really what we need. You then look like you're criticizing your allies.
Yeah.
And that's a really tough spot to be in. So I would say just, as an ally, the number one thing is to listen and to use, whatever your skills and talents are in service of what you're hearing those folks say they need. Whether we're talking about, disabled folks, LGBTQ community, whether we're talking about people of color, you name the marginalized group, it's something that happens all the time. So we want to make sure that we're actually listening. That's the number one thing. And then the other thing really to me is just keep in mind that whatever is happening, it's not about you. If I'm in a place where I am trying to support an organization that's advancing racial justice, that action is not about me. It's about me doing what I can to help. It's not about my feelings. It's not about me being recognized. It's not about, it is not about me. I am there in service of someone or something else. And I think a lot of times people forget that. So I would say to keep that in mind.
You said a lot of the same things that I was thinking. The two problems that I see the most often are, first of all, making assumptions, like you said, making assumptions about what people need, or assuming that, because I have a trans friend, then that means I'm an expert on trans issues. And that goes along with the other issue that I see a lot is allies having problems taking criticism, and they think because they did something with a good intention, that means that if someone tells them, I understand that your intentions were good, but that wasn't what we needed, or you said something that was incorrect, or you did something that wasn't helpful, they, of course, not every ally, there are lots of great allies, but a lot of allies tend to get personally offended by that when it's not about them. It's not that we're saying that they're a bad person or that they have bad intentions and they're trying to harm people. We're just trying to correct them, and they don't take into account that kind of distancing between themselves and what they're saying. So, a lot of times you'd say like, hey, this isn't correct, or you did something that wasn't very helpful. And they'll say, well, it's okay because I meant to do good and because my partner's trans, so I'm an expert on trans stuff. It's like, no, just listen to us, please. I understand that you're trying to help, which is great. But the way to help is to ask us what we need, ask us what can help. Don't make assumptions as to what it is that we want or what it is that would help us, because we've got a pretty good handle on that. And what we need are not people to tell us what to do or how to do it, but people to help us accomplish that.
Yeah. And I think another big one that I see a lot of times is that you got to give people the space to be impatient with mistakes. So one of the things that you hear a lot is people saying like, I'm sorry, you have to be patient with me. I'm going to mess up your pronouns. I'm going to mess up your name. I'm going to say something silly. Like, you got to be patient with me. And I'm with that for the most part. I was my mom's son for 28 years, and all of a sudden I'm her daughter now. And that's a big adjustment for my mom to make. So my mom's going to make mistakes along the way, of course. And I think most reasonable people will be understanding of that. Mm-hmm. But I think what we have to make sure that we say in return to that is that, yes, you do have the space to make those mistakes and, to make honest mistakes, and, because it's weird and it's new and that's fine. You also need to give me the space to be hurt when that kind of stuff happens, especially after a certain amount of time, or at least to be annoyed by it, or to not be entirely 100% patient with that, because chances are, if someone misgenders me, it's probably not the first time that day that it's happened. You know what I mean? And that stuff gets to you. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that you have to just like sit there and take it if somebody's biting your head off and being mean to you and saying awful things to you. But I think it's also fair for us to ask for the space to not be like cheery and sunny and happy every time something like that happens. And to understand that when those mistakes get made, like, we are allowed to have feelings about that. If you misgender me or unknowingly insult me or anything like that, I do think it's fair that I ask for the space to be hurt by that and to express that. And again, it doesn't mean that I have a license to be mean to you or to treat you badly, but I am allowed to have my own feelings about that and express that. And that doesn't mean that I think you're a bad ally, or that I'm not being patient with you, or I'm not giving you a chance or anything like that. So I think it's fair as an ally to ask for some grace when it comes to making mistakes. But I think that can only fairly be paired with us being able to be impatient with that, especially if it's a year, 2 years down the road and you're still using the wrong name and you're still using the wrong pronouns and that kind of stuff. So I think it's a very two-way street on that.
Quit tone policing us, people.
Right.
TLDR.
And Adam has a fun question. Adam wants to know who our favorite musical artists are. So, Ari, did you want to take that first?
I hate answering this question because I get made fun of.
I promise I will not make fun of you because I like Lady Gaga and Katy Perry and Rihanna and all kinds of really like bubblegum pop stuff that people would make fun of me for liking. So I really like have no place to make fun of you for whatever you say.
That's true. But, as a teenager, I would hate answering this kind of question because people are like, what? That's really weird. Why would you do that? So I listen mostly to Japanese music because
what? That's really weird. Why would you do that?
I know. It's not even a language
kidding.
that I understand. It's like, what the heck? You don't even know what they're saying.
I like Rammstein, so it's, yeah.
Oh, God, they're scary. They're real scary. So my favorite band is a band called Last Alliance, which is known for doing the outro theme for Ouran High School Host Club, except that song is absolutely nothing like any of their other music, so don't use that as a basis for what their music sounds like. But it's hard to describe the genre. It's rock, alternative, sometimes kind of punk or metal. And the singer, there's actually two singers in this band, which is pretty cool. Like they switch off doing songs. But the one who does the most songs, or the ones that are my favorite, is honestly one of the best singers I've ever heard in my life. He's amazing. That's it. I don't like answering this question. Let's move on. Okay, Callie, how about you?
Mine changes. Like, music has been like a huge part of my life for almost all of my life. So, it'd be really tough for me to pick one. Like, if I tell you who my favorite is, it's probably going to be like who my favorite is now. So if I had to pick one right now, my favorite's going to be Thrice, hands down. Which, for those of you who don't know, they're sort of like a punk metal sort of thing when they started out, and now it's more kind of indie with a little bit of an edge. It's really tough to describe, but Dustin Kensrue, the singer, he's an amazing lyricist. Their music is awesome, and there's a lot of stuff that they've written that has some real relevance in my life. Even though, Dustin's a Christian. They're not exactly a Christian band, but there are definitely some overt Christian themes in their music, which is it's fine because it's the good parts of the Bible, at least for the most part. But there's literary references. Like, they have a song called "The Long Defeat," which is a Lord of the Rings reference, which is just amazing. And they're great live. They were on hiatus for a really long time. I got to go see them live, though. They got back together. So yeah, their music it means a lot to me. Other sort of honorable mentions that are high up there would be the Deftones, for sure. There's a band called Living Sacrifice that was my first sort of like super heavy metal band, Christian band as well. I used to listen to a lot of Christian metal just because it was usually better. Even as an atheist, like, the Christian bands were just better than the secular bands that played metal. So I really liked Living Sacrifice and Zayo and Haste the Day and that whole sort of Solid State Records Christian metal scene. That was kind of my sort of early 20s and
Christian
late teens.
metal, what a concept.
It's so funny because it's just like so everyday to me. Like, I go to Christian music festivals where most of the bands are metal, and like you listen to people screaming about Jesus and the blood of Jesus and stuff, and it's like it's all second nature to me. So like I really forget that that's a foreign concept to some people.
It really is. Like, that kind of music is of the devil. That's not the Lord's music.
Well, a lot of the festivals that I went to had protesters.
Really crappy acoustic guitar. That's what the Lord likes.
Right. Yeah, a lot of the festivals that I went to actually had
the Lord
protesters.
likes G chords, okay?
Right. G, D, C. Like, yeah. So yeah, that's kind of a rundown. I'm really loving Thrice right now. La Dispute is another favorite. The tattoo that I have across my chest that says "I made a throne for hope to sit." That's from a La Dispute song. Their lyrics are super meaningful. Not everybody's style. The singer has a really sort of unique vocal style that I actually really didn't like all that much until I read his lyrics. So like, make of that what you will.
Do you want to live in a world where ignorance rules? Ignorance would have you believe that the world is a terrifying place, ruled by an unknowable and invisible force that demands your love upon pain of eternal torture. Ignorance would have you believe that the sun is a horse-drawn chariot, the earth is flat, and that faith, the evidence of things not seen, is a virtue. Ignorance would have you believe the South is filled only with ignorant rednecks who've never worn shoes, and that it is a dangerous place for the open-minded to visit and live. Ignorance would have you believe a lot of things. Ignorance is wrong. Reason has been working hard to make life better for all Americans and humanity across the globe since before the discovery of fire. Reason wants a better life for you and for your family. Reason helped Ignaz Semmelweis discover in 1847 that hand washing could help prevent the transmission of disease, saving countless lives. In 1944, Reason helped Grace Hopper and Howard Aiken develop the Mark I computer. Reason took us to the moon, gave us all supercomputers in our pockets, and allows amputees to walk again through prosthetic technology. Reason has done all of this and has never accepted a cent in compensation. Reason reaches across the aisles to help those with faith make morally sound judgments and helps us all change our own worldview when new evidence is brought to light. Reason helps us all. Ignorance is wrong for America and wrong for the world. This 2017, make your voice heard by telling ignorance it is totally wrong for you and the world by making Reason your chosen philosophy. And buy your tickets now for ReasonCon 3. Join us and our speakers and champions of Reason, Lawrence Krauss, Matt Dillahunty, Aaron Ra, Callie Wright, Jim Craig, and Emily Templewood. Also a whole lot of your favorite podcasters, as well as your new friends, old friends, and those unmet in a celebration of all that is reasonable. Join us in helping to put reason back in the driver's seat of America and the world.
ReasonCon 3 will be held in Hickory, North Carolina on April 21st and 22nd, 2017. Please get your tickets at reasonnc.com. That's reasonnc.com.
I'm Miss B. Haven, and I approve this message.
John said, forgive me if this is worded awkwardly. If it helps, I'm also a writer, so this might help future characterizations, if not my understanding. Okay, so the question is, this occurred to me when I went to the ER. I 100% support people expressing themselves how they feel they are. However, wouldn't medical professionals need to know the patient's anatomy? So what do you put in the gender/sex spot on the patient intake paperwork?
Well, I put F because that is who I am. Anatomy questions can be very easily answered either by a cursory examination or by a few questions. I definitely get where this is coming from, but, I also would say, what would we say? What would we say to that person if they were intersex? Don't they need to know your anatomy? So what do you put down on the M to F or on the M or F box? I don't necessarily know that I think that that's a super thing, like a thing really to be worried about that much. For example, I went to the ER once because I think we're beyond TMI on this show at this point. I went to the ER because I peed blood one night and it was super painful and I thought I had a UTI. But I wasn't sure. And it was one of the scariest things that I've ever seen, just like looking down into the toilet and seeing blood. So I went to the ER and, all my insurance paperwork, my ID, all that stuff all says female on it. So the ER doctor asked if I had experienced any vaginal discharge. And I said, actually, I'm transgender. I have a penis. And he said, okay. And then just started asking the relevant, like it was not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
In an emergency situation, maybe, but I mean, what's the chance that the emergency situation has to do with your genitalia in the first place?
Or your reproductive organs.
Right. And if it does, they're going to take a look down there and realize what's going on and that's the end of it. So I really don't think that that's that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's really not very relevant. It's mostly just for insurance purposes. I put female on the sex thing because that's my legal sex and that's how my insurance knows me. So if I put male on there, they'd be like, what? Someone's trying to steal Ari's identity or something. It would really be only in the case of if you were, for example, seeking reproductive care, that would be somewhere where it would be a good idea to let your healthcare professional know about those things. But again, they have to ask you these questions anyway to get a good idea of what's going on with you. Like if I go to a OBGYN and they say, when was your last period? And I'm like, over a year ago now. They're like, what?
Right.
Yeah, because I take testosterone, so I don't have a period anymore. That's not something that can be answered by a simple M or F on my forms. That's something that the doctor has to ask you about, and you have to give the details about that. So I don't know why it would be relevant for like if you're having a heart attack. Like that's no one needs to know that. It's not important.
Right. I mean, the only sort of tangential relevance I could see is, they might need to know what medications you're on, especially because Spiro is a blood pressure medication. So, it sort of messes with your blood pressure a little bit. So, I mean, that sort of thing is relevant. But I think specifically anatomy questions, like if you're going to a doctor on a matter of your anatomy, that's a conversation you're going to have. And if you're not, then it's not really particularly relevant in most cases. I mean, I had an MRI when I went to the ER and they were like, oh, did we get a pregnancy test for you? And I'm like, trust me, you don't need one.
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff. Or like, when I sprained my wrist, you sit at the x-ray machine and it shoots down at you. So there's like a chance that if you're pregnant, it could be harmful. So they were like, any chance you could be pregnant? And I'm like, trust me, no. And like, they just left it at that. So, there are definitely medical situations where it's relevant, but I think at all the relevant times, you're going to have that conversation with your medical provider anyways. So I don't know that, what you put down on the form necessarily matters quite so much.
I don't know, doctor. I've just been having a lot of aches and pains and headaches, and sometimes my hand goes a little numb. Oh, that's interesting. What kind of parts were you born with?
Right. So I'm really glad that the way that I copy pasted these from Facebook led me to be able to ask this next question because it's one that's been weighing heavily on my mind. And this question comes from Ryan, and Ryan wants to know, Ari, how do I grow up to be as cool as you?
Next.
You have to answer the question. This is a listener that asked a question for an episode. Ari, you're doing the listener a disservice by not answering this question.
Okay, I'll translate the question for you. How do I be a married bachelor? You don't do it. It's not a thing. It's a contradiction. First, you have to be born on January 30th, 1992 in the Woodlands Hospital in the Woodlands, Texas. That's the first step. So go back and do that. And then we'll talk from there.
I guess that.
Also, you have to be in a lot of emotional pain and use humor as your coping mechanism. So that works too.
There you go. There we go.
Hey. Just get really traumatized and then you'll be just like me. This is getting really serious. Let's move on.
Yeah, right. It got way too real just now.
Hashtag open book. Oh, another question for me. Yay. It's from Patrick. When did you first become aware of the concept of non-binary identification? Was it something that you always felt innately but had never been able to formulate into words, or was it more of a revelation that you had to process? Kind of both, which is a great way to not answer your question. So I first became aware of it when I was in college. I believe it was my junior year. And that was the first time that I ever met anyone who identified as non-binary. I had never heard of such a thing before. And growing up, I did feel a sort of innate sense of difference. I didn't know what it was. Actually, when I was around 14, 15, I used to call myself a gay boy trapped in a bisexual girl's body. So that makes a lot of sense now. So I didn't feel like I fit in with the girls, but I also didn't feel like I fit in with the boys. But I thought that was just because I'm weird. I didn't really think it had anything to do with my gender. because I didn't have a lot of like overt dysphoria, and I was just used to having my feminine name and feminine pronouns, so it didn't really bother me that much because I didn't know there was another option, really. So it wasn't until I met this person who was non-binary. Actually, they use the term genderqueer, and I didn't learn about non-binary until a little later, but it's kind of an interchangeable term. And I was just really interested in that because when I first learned about transgender people when I was in high school, there was no such concept that was available on the internet. It was just a transgender person is a person who was born female but becomes a male, or the other way around. And I knew that wasn't me because I was just sitting there thinking about myself as a man, and I'm just like, oh, that doesn't make sense. That's not me. So I guess I'll just stay the way that I am and be happy with that, because I definitely wouldn't be happy being a man. So it wasn't until I started looking into that and talking to people and looking at forums online like a millennial that I found out that was even a thing. And it did click with me originally, but there were so many different terms flying around that I didn't really know which one was me. So I knew that I was some flavor of not cis, but I actually didn't consider myself transgender until a year or two later, because still in my mind, I had that concept of transgender is binary. So I thought that non-binary and transgender were two totally different concepts. And it wasn't until a little while later that, again, I was talking to more people and getting more educated in these things that I realized that being non-binary is a form of being trans. And I was a little uncomfortable with using the term trans because I was like, there are people that have like really bad dysphoria, and I'm like, I'm co-opting their struggle and taking this term that doesn't belong to me. But as I thought about it more, it just really seemed to fit my experience more. So I became a lot more comfortable with using that. So it was a thing that I did kind of know growing up that I was different, but I didn't really know what it was until I had the language to describe it.
Good stuff. That's education. Because I still you and I are good friends, but obviously it's still something that I'm learning about too, the non-binary experience. So that's good stuff. Thanks for the question,
non-binary
Patrick.
experience. That's my new show.
Oh gosh, I was trying to think of off the top of my head, like a really funny non-binary parody name for Matt Dillahunty. I don't know.
Matthew with no H, just Matthew.
Right, got it. So Adam asks, how do you deal with gender body dysmorphia, like in a practical sense, tips and tricks kind of thing? Now, I am not a medical professional. I don't think dysmorphia and dysphoria are the same thing.
They are not.
Dysmorphia, to my understanding, isn't that when you have a vision of your body in your head that doesn't match what the reality is? Like you think that you look differently than you do, in real life?
Like you look in the mirror and you see your nose, and to you it looks like giant and bulbous and horrible, and nobody else can understand why, because they see that your nose looks like a perfectly fine nose that isn't ugly at all. And you just kind of have this fixation on that one body part, and it brings you a lot of shame and anxiety, because you're always worried about, people are going to notice this other thing about my body, but it's not even really a thing. It's just you who sees it that way.
Right. And I am 100% positive that describes the experience of some trans people. So I don't want to outright exclude that. And I would say I guess I'd have to learn more about, the clinical definition, but that actually does sort of map to the way that I feel about my body sometimes. Like I know better. I look in the mirror and I see something, and it doesn't look the same to me as it does to everyone else. I don't know where the line is between just lacking confidence and sort of fixating on that a little bit, and where that ends and where dysmorphia begins. But yeah, so the word that we typically use is dysphoria. And dysphoria is just, that word by itself is sort of a catch-all term that just sort of means extreme discomfort. And gender dysphoria specifically is typically the way that people describe the difference between the way that we feel our secondary sexual characteristics should be versus the way that they are in real life. I guess that's kind of the best way to describe it. And how I deal with it in a practical sense, curling into the fetal position and crying is one.
Practical advice.
Yeah, a facetious answer, but I mean, the reality is sometimes there is nothing you can do, and you just have to endure it until it either fades away or becomes less intense. Sometimes that's just the way that it is, unfortunately. Sometimes I will dress in a specific way that will sort of ward off dysphoria a little bit, or sort of like the question at the top of the show, like, if I'm feeling, I get what I call imposter syndrome. It's sort of like internalized transphobia, where like, I feel like I'm not real, so I sort of, that'll be a day where I decide to put on makeup, or I try to wear like a fancy dress, or those kinds of things. And again, since we're past TMI, way past TMI on the show, I usually wear boxer shorts because there's no way to say this without it sounding funny, but my balls are huge. And that's a huge sense of discomfort for me, dysphoria wise. And so typically I wear boxers because I don't like wearing things that are tight down there. Sometimes, I have, what we stereotypically refer to as women's underwear that I wear sometimes. And sometimes I have to make a choice, like, cause it feels better wearing those kinds of clothes, but it also makes me sort of fixate on that part of my body because it's tighter and more constricted down there. So I'm more aware of it. So a lot of times I have to make a calculation about what I'm going to wear that day and how it's going to make me feel. So a lot of it's thinking through that kind of stuff. I have a lot of dysphoria surrounding my chest, and thinking that it looks too small in proportion to my body, and I deal with that a lot. I stuff my bra a lot. And still, like, it's still, like, is not necessarily where I want it to be. I'm hoping that surgery will fix that. So, and that's tough because I know that what I look like on the outside still does not match what I really look like, but it helps that my outward presentation looks that way, even if I know that it's, I don't want to call it fake, but manufactured. Like if I'm stuffing my bra or whatever, that sort of practical things like that help. And then I mean, just the things that you would expect, just talking about it with Celeste helps, because Celeste experiences dysphoria too. And it's something that, and it's just another one of those things, if you can talk about it with someone who like actually knows what you're going through, and you can describe this to them and exactly what the other person is feeling, that's helpful. Because sometimes it's a really lonely feeling, especially before I knew a lot of other trans people. Trying to explain this to the friends that I had then was like, it's like trying to explain capitalism to an alien. You know what I mean? Like, it's just something that was just a completely foreign concept. And it's not that they don't care or they want to help. It's just not an experience that they have any reference at all to understand. So it can get to feel really lonely. So it's a lot of sort of commiserating with people who go through the same kind of stuff. Another thing that I saw that I really would like to do, but I haven't because I'm lazy, is a self-care kit that's sort of filled with things that you go to for self-care. So, and this can mean, whatever it means to whoever, because like, to some people, self-care is doing frivolous things and having fun and watching movies. And to some people, self-care is like making sure that you eat today, making sure that you're taking a shower, making sure that you're taking care of yourself on a very like simple and practical level.
Let's list the things that Ari has failed at today.
Aww. But it's sort of like putting together a kit of those kind of things so they're easy to access, and like committing yourself to use one of those things in a day or something like along those lines. A lot of it ends up looking like self-care for, depression or anxiety or anything like that, because a lot of those feelings go along with that dysphoria. So, some of that stuff, at least in my experience, it looks like self-care for other things too.
As far as practical tips and tricks, I know more about the transmasculine side of things since that's my experience, but there are lots of products you can buy to help you with dysphoria. For example, chest binders are one that I use every day. They make specific articles of clothing that you can use to flatten down your chest to give the appearance of a more masculine chest shape. Please do not use ace bandages. Please do not use ace bandages. Please don't use them. They are very bad for
Or
you.
tape.
Yeah, don't
Or tape.
use. If you're going to bind your chest, please either put on some sports bras. That's something that people do if they don't have binders. They'll put on sports bras that are a little too tight, or put on like 2 or 3 sports bras, or buy a binder. And there are lots and lots of different binders out there, and they do cost money, but there are also binder exchange programs. So if you don't have the disposable income, you can look for a binder exchange program, and someone might be able to donate a binder to you in your size. There are packers, which is basically a rubber fake penis that you put in your underwear to give you a bulge, which is pretty awesome. And there's also a device called an STP, which is a stand to pee device. It's kind of a tube-ish kind of thing that you can pee through, and you can stand up to pee if you don't have a penis. So there are products like that. I know for trans feminine people, there's, things that you can put in your bra to make your breasts look bigger, and I don't know what other kind of products there are. You probably know about that.
A lot of trans feminine folks use what's called a gaff. That is basically a piece of clothing that lets you tuck to make the front of your groin look smooth. So that's something you can buy them, but you can also make them. And that's something that's a pretty big deal to some folks. Like for me, for example, I never leave the house without a bra on because I need to look like I have boobs. Never really felt the need to have a gaff, but I think that's probably because of my weight, because I never have a visible bulge in the front anyways. So, as I lose weight, that may change. But yeah, that's another thing. And that was something that actually was pretty foreign to me until I got to know someone who needed it. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers the stuff, at least that I'm aware of. And you went all over the transmasculine stuff. So.
And another big thing that helps me is dressing in a way that makes me feel comfortable. Even if there's nothing I can do to change my body, I can change the clothes that I put on it, and I can choose to wear clothes that make me look the way that I want to look. So that is a good way of doing that, is choosing the kind of outfits that I want to wear to express who I am. Wearing certain types of clothes that won't be tight around my chest, for example, so that it looks more flat. Or I like to wear skinny jeans because I like the way my legs look, even though they're not very masculine or feminine. They're just kind of legs, I think, which is good. I like to have just normal and non-gendered legs. So I
think... #why Callie never wears pants.
There you go. So if you're not able to, if you're feeling down about the way that you look, or there's something that's bothering you that you're not able to fix in the moment, just dressing in a way that makes you feel cool is something you can do to help yourself.
All right, Johns asked. I think it's your turn next. Sorry, I'm a jerk.
Johns asked, like Callie just said, what keeps you guys going in your activism from day to day? What inspires you?
This is an easy one for me, and it is actually people like Johns.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that to be funny. I won't go into details because it's between Johnson and I, but Johnson and I have had private conversations on Facebook where we just, sort of talk about stuff. And I hear from people who listen to the show all the time, people who just, if nothing else, reach out to say, hey, you said this one thing on this one episode that really meant something to me, and that was really cool. Or, you said something that really helped me, or, that kind of stuff. I live for that kind of stuff. And it's actually happened a couple of times where I get down in a rut and I'm like, this whole thing is meaningless. We're not making a difference. I might as well just stop. I've never seriously considered ending the show, by the way, but just sort of where I'm in the throes of fuck, are we really doing anything here? Does any of this really matter? And it's almost always when I'm feeling that way that I get an email or a Facebook message from someone who listens to the show saying, something as simple as, gosh, that I had no idea that was a thing. Now I know, and I'm going to do better. Or, You've helped me become a better ally, or you've helped me deal with people in my family better, that kind of stuff. Like that is what keeps me going 100%. Just knowing that there are people who are touched by what we do on the show, because that's the reason that we do it in the first place, right? Like none of us are getting rich doing this. And we do it because we think these things are important, and because we really do want to help people and make a difference for people. And knowing, and hearing from people occasionally saying that, yes, you are doing that, like you're being successful in helping people and, creating a space for people to be who they are. That's the best thing that I could ever possibly hope for.
Yeah, definitely. It continually baffles me every time somebody tells me that something that I said or did meant something to them. I'm like, that's really weird. I don't understand why, but I'm glad that it helped you. I am just not a natural activist. I'm not like Callie. I am introverted and I have trouble talking to strangers, and I need a lot of, self-care, and I get overwhelmed easily with tough conversations. So this kind of thing is not easy for me to do, and it does put a lot of stress on me, but I definitely think that it's worth it every time that somebody tells me that they learned something because of something that I said on the show or something that I wrote in a blog post, or anytime someone tells me that they feel less alone because they have the show to listen to and they appreciate my perspective and Callie's perspective. Even if I'm not necessarily, going in and saving people from homelessness or, doing really practical stuff, even just being able to talk to people and connect with people is something that is really what makes it worth it for me. And if it wasn't for that, if I didn't feel like anyone was being helped by it, I don't think I would do this, because it's not very easy for me at all. So it's definitely the listeners and the friends that I've made and the community that keeps me going doing this. And also the question asks, what keeps you guys going in your activism from day to day? I don't do it every day. I don't know about Callie. If talking to people on Facebook is activism, then sure, I do that most days, but I
think it can be.
Yeah, it can be. But I don't want people to feel like we're superhuman people, or that we're like super activists or making all these, saving the world, which Callie is, but I'm not. So I'm just a normal person.
I don't know that I am either.
I'm just a normal person who has issues and struggles like everyone else. And some people like what I have to say, so I keep doing it, even though I don't understand why.
Yeah, I do stuff for the show almost every day in one way or another. So if that counts, I guess I do it day to day. But some days that looks like just sitting in Google Docs and writing some show notes. It's not necessarily like ground shaking, world changing stuff every day for sure.
Yeah.
The staff of Secular Coalition for America lobbies U.S. Congress on issues of separation of church and state, and they've become a powerhouse for change in the United States government. You'll definitely want to subscribe to receive their email action alerts. These are updates for important issues and ones that you can get involved with directly. And hopefully, you'll consider making a contribution to the Secular Coalition for America to help them continue fighting for your equality. You can do it all at secular.org.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in physics, I learned that I'm a loser.
Today in school, I learned that I'm ugly and useless. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. In history, I learned that I'm trash.
Today in school, I learned that I have no friends.
In biology,
In English, I learned that I make people sick. And at lunch, I learned that I sit on my own because I smell. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me.
In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. And in math, I learned that I'm trash.
The only thing I didn't learn in school today
The only thing I didn't learn today
the only thing I didn't learn
Is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov.
Before we jump back into the show, it's time to thank our patrons. Shout out this week to Sean, Lewis, John, Sean, and Whitney. Thank you so much for contributing to the show financially and for believing in us enough to support our mission to smuggle penises into women's restrooms and to force every American into their very own mandatory gay marriage. To find out more, head over to patreon.com/thegaytheist manifesto. Thank you. So, next question. I don't know how this snuck into the front sheet because...
I don't know either. It's kind of a mystery.
You're a liar. You're a damn dirty liar.
Probably Jesus put it in there. Thanks, Jesus.
Because I just went and looked at all of the statuses on Facebook, and I don't see this in there. So, Samantha, quote-unquote, Samantha, this mystery person, says, why does the show suck so much? And... I mean, I don't know.
Because of you, Samantha. Because of you.
So, yeah, I don't know.
We were having a great time, and then you came in here, throwing your shade all around, and now we're upset and hashtag triggered.
I'm crying right now.
Can't you hear the tears falling onto the microphone? Like Taylor Swift, except a microphone instead of a guitar.
Right. Next question.
Doop-a-doop. Colette wants to know, do you have opinions about drag from a gender perspective as an LGBT art form, etc.? And there's a second part, which we will get to after this one.
Good. So I actually do have some feelings about drag. I'm going to be honest, I'm not a huge fan. And I want to say it's not necessarily drag itself that I have an issue with, especially because I know there are so many trans women whose first sort of space where they could express themselves in a feminine way was drag, and I know that's very valuable for them, and I'm not necessarily interested in tearing people down or taking that away from people, but the way that it's done a lot of times ends up being sort of transphobic and transmisogynistic. There was a drag benefit somewhere, I won't be more specific, that was actually a benefit for a trans organization. And the host, being like the sassy sort of drag queen, because that's what drag queens are supposed to be, was like, oh yeah, for those who don't know what trans are, it's where people want to chop off their wieners.
Okay.
And it's like, that's just, and of course this, this goes back to, how far do we go in comedy and what's funny and what's not. But like, that's a really harmful stereotype about trans people. And like, we're making a joke out of it. And, just different things like that kind of make me uncomfortable, at least about the way that it's generally done, even if it's not necessarily the concept that I have a problem with. So yeah, I don't hate it. I'm not like gonna go on a crusade against drag or anything like that. But not really my thing, and it does sort of sometimes present itself in some pretty problematic ways. We'll leave it that.
Yeah.
We'll leave it there.
I mean, my perspective doesn't really matter on this because I am not a trans woman, so it's just kind of whatever I think. But I have a few friends who do drag who are gay men, and they have done a lot of research into the history of it. I had two friends in college who gave a presentation on drag and the history of drag because that's something that they enjoy doing. And I think that's awesome. I have absolutely no problem with people putting on a show and performing and expressing themselves and getting dressed up and doing makeup and that kind of thing. The only issue that I have come across sometimes is it being... There are gay men who do this as well, but some straight men who come in and don't really know anything about what drag is supposed to be about, and they just think it's kind of funny and a joke to, dress up like a woman and put on gaudy makeup and fancy dresses and that kind of thing and just make fun of the whole thing. And in college, we actually had a charity drag show every year, and most of the participants were straight guys. And I remember the last year that I was there, there was a little bit more of a discussion about, is this kind of insensitive? Because we can't really tell people you can't participate in this because you're straight, obviously. And there are gay people who would come in and do the same thing, who don't understand the history of drag and don't really have the same passion for it that other people do, and don't understand what the cultural context is and how to do it in an appropriate way, in a respectful way. So there was a bit of discussion my senior year about that, about, straight guys coming in and just kind of doing the whole thing as a joke and just like, haha, this is obviously a man in a dress who's, acting like a woman, whatever that means. So that's the only thing. I think as long as people are respectful and understand the history and the culture surrounding it, I don't personally have a problem with it. But again, not a trans feminine person, so my opinion doesn't matter that much.
And then Colette's next question, I think, is the more important of the two,
right,
if I can be honest. Also, what is the best flavor of ice cream? Oreo, hands down.
Is that technically a flavor?
Oh, yeah, there's Oreo ice cream.
Oh, is that not just like chocolate cookie ice cream? I guess technically.
It's got the cream and stuff in it, too.
I would say anything from Jenny's in Chicago.
Which I would wholeheartedly agree. You and I shared some when I was there, and it was fantastic.
We drove through horrendous traffic for half an hour, or maybe it was even closer to 45 minutes, just to get to Jenny's, and we were frustrated and just like, oh God, people keep trying to merge into us, and this is terrible, and I hate Chicago. And we get to Jenny's, and we order our ice cream, and Callie takes her first bite, and she goes, it was all worth it to come to Chicago just for this ice cream.
Literally, it would have been. Like, speaking at the American Humanist Association convention was nice. Being in the Cognitive Dissonance Studios live was nice. But the ice cream.
Yes.
My God.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I guess that means it's your turn to read the question.
I actually had a dream about Jenny's the other night.
Did you really?
I did. I dreamed that I went to Jenny's and they were giving out free refills of ice cream, so I was eating so much goddamn ice cream.
Oh my
God. They had a contest, and they had a mystery flavor, and you had to guess what flavor you thought it was. And then as I was leaving, there was a wedding going on outside, and they had their own custom flavors of ice cream in these huge bins of ice cream, and I was trying to go over and sneak some of their ice cream. And people were like, don't, that's for the wedding. And I was like, but I really want to know what the special flavor of ice cream is.
Oh, gosh.
It's
you have awesome dreams, it sounds like. So, yeah, next question.
Alice wants to know, what are your thoughts on The Danish Girl, the film and or book? And where can we find your convention schedule for 2017?
So, easy answer to the second one. There isn't a specific place that you can find it. All I've got on the books for 2017 right now is NanoCon in Nashville, which is March 17th, if memory serves, and ReasonCon, which you're going to hear an ad for at some point in this show. So
yes.
Those are the two. I'm sure much more will materialize throughout 2017. I'm hoping to do a little bit more touring, but nothing set in stone yet aside from those two conventions. So, first question, though, what are your thoughts on the Danish Girl film and or book? To be honest, I have not read the book nor seen the movie.
I have not either. This is great.
All I will say is that I am pretty much all the way over cis guys playing trans women in movies. And we had that discussion on the representation in media episode, so I won't sort of dive too much deeper into that. But generally speaking, it's, I can't speak to the quality of the movie. I'm not saying it's automatically a horrible movie. It could be a great movie, and I've heard mixed things. But just generally speaking, it's really tough for me to see a cis guy portray a trans woman on screen, generally for sort of cultural context reasons, more so than anything else. So,
yeah, that
April.
What she said.
April has a question that I'm sure Ari has a very, very strong stance on. Mm-hmm. Forgive me if you have already addressed your stances on this important question, but the world needs your educated opinion. Who is the best Star Trek commander? For this, please feel free to include non-captain leaders if you wish. Captain Sisko, without a doubt, hands down, second to none. This is not a popular opinion. I recognize that. It is also the correct one. So here's the thing about Captain
Callie.
Sisko.
Let's hear your proof.
You see Captain Sisko take on an assignment that he hates as the commander of Deep Space Nine. He becomes a war hero a great father, a great husband, a religious icon, a good friend, a mentor, an athlete. Need I go on? In all seriousness, I think the reason that I like him the most is because he's the most human of the characters, or of the captains anyways. Most of the captains seem sort of one-dimensional-ish. And this is coming from a person who thought of Captain Picard as a father figure growing up. So I'm not dismissing this, but the one who seems the most real and the most human to me is him by far. And it's just because you see so much more of him as a human being, not just as a Starfleet captain. So I think, if other writers were to write the other captains in those ways, my opinion might change. Obviously, this all happened 30 years ago. We're not going to change the past, at least maybe not. But yeah, Captain Sisko is my favorite, hands down.
I'm convinced.
Next question.
Richard wants to know Blazing Saddles or Young Frankenstein.
Richard, I'm really sorry.
Oh no. You haven't seen either of them?
I have not seen either.
This is amazing. I've seen both of them and I don't even watch movies.
Oh,
because my dad bought
the spotlight is on you, Ari. Do the damn thing.
My dad bought a collection of Mel Brooks movies and I was bored, so I watched all of them. I'm going to go with Young Frankenstein. I think it's more quotable overall. I mean, Blazing Saddles has the stinking badges thing. And it also has Gene Wilder, who's pretty sexy, I think, or was before he got dead. But I think wait, does Young Frankenstein have Gene Wilder too? Yes. Okay. Zach is nodding at me. Yes, it does. Okay. They both have Gene Wilder. Young Frankenstein is more quotable. And, so I'm going with that. There you go. It's official. Fair
enough. James asks, if you could instantly change one thing about the world, what would it be?
Everything. No, not everything.
I was going to say, I would have the world be more on fire. The entire world be more on fire than it is.
No two people are not on fire.
Thank you for the Homestar Runner reference. I'm sure there are like 10 people listening to this that thought that was hilarious. In all honesty, like being 100% serious, if I could instantly change one thing about the world, what would it be? It would be empathy. I would inflate the sense of empathy that people have toward one another. Because I think lack of empathy or misdirected empathy or disproportionately directed empathy, I think is kind of the root of a lot of the problems that we face in the world. And people who learn empathy, generally speaking, like if you listen to people who, used to be like horribly anti-gay or anti-trans that are not now, a lot of times you hear the story is they learned empathy in one way or another. They came to understand the people that they hated, and it's harder to hate someone that you understand. It's obviously not impossible, but it's a little harder to do that once that person becomes human and you understand them and you understand where they're coming from. So I think, in all seriousness, if I could change anything about the world, I would think more empathy would be my choice.
It's hard to argue with that or top that. I think I would ban the alt-right. It's illegal.
Like I can't argue with that either.
I feel like I have to say something different because I probably would have said the same thing, but other than empathy, ban
the Nazis is what that is.
Yeah, ban the Nazis.
Because that's
and also critical thinking. I think I don't know how you could phrase that. Like, I command everyone in the world to be good critical thinkers. At some
it
sort
should be
of
a
threshold.
required class in high schools. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Or even middle schools and elementary schools. Honestly, like on whatever appropriate level there is.
Because I think if we took care of the empathy problem, there would still be the problem of people not understanding how to think good, which I am, of course, the best at and number one. But
tremendous, best thinker ever.
There you go. #skeptic. Of course, there are, like you said, a lot of problems with empathy and people treating each other crappily for no reason. But another big problem in the world is people just not being educated about stuff, or people refusing to become educated about things because they're stuck in their mental framework of whatever they have. And so if people had more critical thinking skills, I think they would be able to open their minds up a little more and eventually hopefully reach correct conclusions about things that would therefore not be harmful to people.
It's good.
Like a miracle mineral solution, which is bleach that you drink that cures your cancer.
Right.
I mean, it does cure your cancer. Cures a lot of things in your life.
Right. Next question.
Oh, yay. One anonymous J. Traeger wants to know, are you ready to lose again on the podcast-a-thon to No Religion Required?
I mean,
are you
I'm
ready?
not a shit talker. I think it says a lot about this anonymous J. Traeger person, whoever they may be, that they're shit talking in reference to charity. What I'm ready to do, anonymous J. Traeger, whoever you are, is to do my best to help raise money for a good cause for Camp Quest on the Dogma Debate broadcast-a-thon on Saturday starting at 4 p.m. Central.
Podcast-a-thon?
What? David doesn't like to be called.
No,
he doesn't like his show to be called
a podcast-a-thon. That's what it is.
Okay, we're going to say broadcast-a-thon.
Because I said so.
Well, David identifies his show as a broadcast, not a podcast.
Shh.
So we're going to respect his identity.
It's also a podcast, though. If it's not a podcast, then why do I get it on my podcast app on my phone? Huh?
Right. So
the point is that even if you guys make more money, then Gay Manifesto is still going to also make money, and we're still doing good stuff. So
and also our money is better.
Yes.
So
and more inclusive.
And we also did not start shit talking about charity because we're good people and we just want to help. Anonymous J. Traeger, whoever you are.
What a jerk.
Pete asks, what's an opinion you've had that you've done a complete 180 on? What'd it take to do it? Well, there are a couple of things.
Yeah,
the existence of God is one.
That's a big one, yeah.
And I've told that story a million times. I'm not going to tell it again. I actually read the Bible. It didn't make sense. Boom. Atheist. The others that are more recent would be one, the idea of counter-protesting groups like the Westboro Baptist. I think I told this on the last episode of the episode before, so I won't get too super detailed on that one. The other one I'm not 100% sure that I've talked about, it at least not recently, is my opinion on abortion. And I wouldn't say that I'd done a complete 180 on abortion. I used to be sort of murky and sort of vaguely anti-choice. But it actually took Matt Dillahunty debating with the secular pro-choice organization, whoever that is, the girl who leads that organization. He did a public debate with her, and listening to his arguments in that debate actually was what changed my mind, because I'd never heard the arguments presented the way that he had. And so, it changed my mind. So that's, again, if you want to be a person who argues about the effectiveness of debate and the merits of debate, I can say there's one public debate. He didn't change the person who he was debating's mind, but me as a spectator listening to that debate, it absolutely changed my mind. And again, it wasn't a 180, but I went from vaguely anti-choice to 100% unequivocally pro-choice. So those would be the big ones for me.
Other than the whole God thing, which you mentioned already, I hate to admit this. I am ashamed of myself, but when I was a teenager, I was a libertarian. I really was.
Okay.
I was kind of hardcore libertarian. Like I read Atlas Shrugged and I read The Fountainhead, and those were two of my favorite books. And I was always pretty socially liberal, so that's why I identified with the libertarian thing. And I think the reason why I was libertarian on kind of like economic and government issues is because I was pretty privileged as a kid and as a teenager. I never ever had to worry about money. My dad made a lot of money in his job, and we never ever had to worry about anything like that. And I pretty much had access to almost anything that I wanted. So I just didn't realize what it was like. And I also didn't understand the system of oppression really that I understand now, because growing up as a, white, well-off, ostensibly cisgender female person, I just didn't know about any of that stuff. I didn't realize that bootstraps aren't enough. I felt like, if you want something, you should work hard for it, which is true. You should do that. But I didn't understand that working hard can only get you so far, and that there are other forces at play, things about yourself that aren't up to you to be able to change. You can't just decide not to be part of a marginalized group, not be part of an oppressed class. And that was something that I didn't realize until I got into college and started, learning more about the race situation in this country and about poverty and about LGBTQ stuff, that I was able to, I guess, kind of better understand why the libertarian viewpoint was nice, but it wasn't very realistic.
Right. Yeah. It's a very utopian kind of thing. And I don't think a lot of people recognize that, which actually ties really nicely into the next question. Johnny asked, why do you believe so many people don't think white cisgender male Christian privilege exists? Strangely enough, the answer to that question is because white cisgender male Christian privilege.
Exactly. But Callie, that's unfalsifiable. You're using circular logic.
Right.
You're using privilege to prove the existence of privilege. That's not very smart.
Right. So the previous co-host of the show, Daniel Wilsong, actually, I think said it best when we were talking about privilege. He said, where privilege exists, blinders exist. And I think that's what it really comes down to. Privilege is not just privilege. There's a lot of other things that tie into it. And when you live in this insulated world where literally the only thing that matters is how hard you work, it's really tough to get the fact that there are places in the world where that doesn't actually count. When you're a person who is seen as the default person, people don't think of you of anything except as a person. But when people think of me, and a lot of times anyways, they don't think of me as just a person. They think of me as a trans person, and that skews their perceptions. They think of a person of color as a black person, as an Asian person, as a Hispanic person, so on and so forth. And that changes their perception of that person based on whatever stereotypes they have in their head a lot of times. So when you're not used to being treated that way, it's very easy to get the idea that everyone is treated that way. And the world looks like a different place when you're inside that bubble. And, speaking as a person who used to sort of be on the inside of that bubble, I can vouch for that. I used to be one of those people that thought, white privilege was a sham, that straight privilege, cisgender privilege, all of that stuff. I used to think that was all crap. And it was because even though I had this big secret and I was, desperately hiding who I was from everyone, but that was just me. And surely that did color the way that I acted around people and my perceptions and everything like that. But as far as everyone else knew, I was just your average straight cis guy. I was like way overweight, and obviously that has some things to it. But for the most part, I had the luxury of being accepted at face value for who I was. I was able to walk into a situation without any sorts of perceptions about me, unless it was about like the clothes I was wearing or something, which is something that's totally different. And I stepped out of that world when I came out, and I lost those privileges. And it was a really jarring experience. One of the things that I always say is, like, if you want to understand male privilege, talk to a trans woman, or at least a trans woman who came out at some point, after, being a teenager or being, in your 20s or 30s. Because generally speaking, those are folks who know what it's like to at least be treated like your, straight cis, whatever. And then sort of step away from that and understand how differently people see you and how differently you get treated when you're not perceived that way anymore. So yeah, that's a really long answer, but that's sort of my thoughts. Ari, did you have anything to add?
I find that the biggest problem is a straw man of what the concept of privilege is. I see a lot of people who kind of latch onto that buzzword. Someone says, like, oh, white privilege, and someone latches onto that buzzword of privilege and is like, well, I'm white and I've had struggles in my life. I haven't had everything handed to me just because I'm white. My race has nothing to do with it. And that is true, that there are white people, straight people, men, Christians who have difficult lives. That is absolutely not up for debate. That is definitely the case. We're not saying that if you're, any of these categories, that it means your life is always sunshine and roses and you never have any problems and you're just going throughout your life collecting your money and your partners and your employment and whatever. They just misunderstand what we mean when we talk about privilege. We're not saying that you don't have any problems. We're saying you don't have any problems that are directly related to you being, for example, not white. And the other thing people don't realize is that privilege is a spectrum. It's not just either you're not privileged or you're totally privileged. You can be privileged in some ways and not in other ways. You can be, for example, a white gay man who is white and male, but is also not straight. So in that aspect of their lives, they're not as privileged as someone who's straight. And there are lots of different, I guess they call them axes of privilege. So your gender, your race, your socioeconomic status, your religion, all those sorts of things. And wherever you are on those spectrums, it creates a unique picture. So it's not to say that if you're black, you're automatically going to have a terrible life. And if you're white, you're automatically going to have an awesome life and have everything that you want. It depends on a lot of different things. It depends on where you fall on those other factors. And a lot of other factors in your life. Sometimes it's luck and chance and the people that you interact with and the communities that you're a part of, whether they're able to kind of overlook those sorts of things, or they're well aware enough of the problems to be able to override them. So again, it's a lot more complicated than people make it out to be.
Yeah, that's a really, really great breakdown of it. So, and then the last question we have from an anonymous questioner: is there a point to trying to reach out to other places with more restrictive HRT and trans regulations, like the worst parts of the U.S., religious hospitals, and even overseas to the EU? And I asked this person for a little bit of clarification because I didn't necessarily understand what they meant. What the question really comes down to is it worth it trying to change places that have bad laws and regulations surrounding the way that trans people are treated, the way that transition is treated, the access to medical care and that kind of stuff? Is it worth it to go to those places and try and change those things? And I think the answer is unequivocally yes, because not just because like, oh, morals, we gotta fight, that kind of stuff, but it's super slow, unfortunately, painfully slow, unexcusably slow, and lots of people hurt and get lost in the process. But change does happen, and the difference is able to be made for a lot of people in places. More and more companies are taking on trans inclusive healthcare, those kinds of things. And when that kind of stuff becomes the norm, it's easier to pass laws, and those things can sort of trickle down to people. So yeah, I mean, I think it's 100% worth it. It's really hard, because, you fight these fights and you get so little for the amount of effort that you put into it. And, some people don't have the bandwidth for that, and that's okay, because you have to take care of yourself, like we say all the time on the show. But I do 100% think that it's worth it, and think that it's something that we should be doing, absolutely to the extent that we're able to.
I definitely agree with you. And, at one point, the entire country was like that, and it was only due to the efforts of people who were banging their heads against the walls trying to get stuff done that we now have areas of the country and of the world that are a lot more accepting and give people a lot more access to the care that they need. And of course, there, like you were talking about, there are pockets where it's still like it used to be, and we just need to kind of infect those places with the social justice virus. So it is really frustrating and difficult, but try to think about the people who live there who don't really have a choice. The people don't have the luxury of being able to just move to somewhere where their life will be better in a lot of cases. So it's up to people who do have the power to be able to make change, to make life better for those people.
Awesome. Well, that is all we got. Went a little over time. Not like there's some arbitrary thing. I usually try and keep the show to an hour, but that's fine. There's lots of good stuff in here. I think this was a great conversation. I think we went over a lot of good stuff. So we're gonna close it out there. I mean, and that's all the questions that we got too. So we don't really have a choice but to close it out there. No, I mean, we're like super popular and famous. We got like 3 million questions, and we had to. I can't even do that. So that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto. I want to thank everyone who submitted questions, and I hope that we did well answering them, the funny ones and the serious ones. We definitely appreciate both. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at Gaytheist Callie. You can find the show on Twitter at The Gaytheist. And Ari,
Good morning, and thank you for choosing Gaytheist Airlines, where your safety and comfort are our number one priorities. At this time, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please stow your carry-on luggage underneath the seat in front of you and friend Ari Stillman on Facebook. Make sure your tray table and seat back are in their full upright position, or you will die. If you're seated next to an emergency exit and are unable or unwilling to assist others in the event of an emergency, please email aristillman4@gmail.com to request a change of seat. You will be reassigned after a brief processing period of 6 to 8 weeks. We remind you that this is a non-regressive leftist flight. Listening to the SJW Circle Jerk on iTunes or Spreaker is prohibited on the entire aircraft, including the lavatories. Disabling or destroying the cuck detectors in the lavatories is prohibited by law. If you have any questions about our flight today, please don't hesitate to ask one of our diverse flight attendants, who have been selected for this flight based purely on their ethnicity, gender, and socioeconomic status in order to comply with international affirmative action regulations. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy your flight.
You've got a really good voice for that.
I know.
I'm just throwing that out there.
So soothing with my puberty voice.
Right. I just know that, like, if I was on a flight and I heard you give that speech, I'd probably feel a little bit better about things. So yeah. If you want to support the show and the activism we do, you can head to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto and make a per episode donation as little as $1 per episode. If that's not feasible, you can also head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. That helps us get heard by lots more people. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things, and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.